An hour before that, Ruth had looked at the clock and realized that it was time to pick up Nathan from school. She was in the early stages of her third pregnancy, and her morning sickness hadn't abated by the afternoon, and she was concerned it wasn't actually morning sickness but a virus that had sent her to the couch that morning and kept her there for most of the afternoon, letting Bernard, who was 4, watch 3 reruns of Gilligan's Island in a row. She considered calling her friend Linda Messenger and asking her to pick Nathan up, but she'd already asked Linda to take him to school in the morning in the first place with her own 6-year-old Jared. Linda did not yet know that Ruth was pregnant, and so Ruth didn't want to ask her. A two-way favor would have sold Ruth and her condition out, and Ruth didn't want anyone to know this early, not even Linda Messenger, who she wasn't always so sure was rooting for her. She instead called her mother-in-law Phyllis. Phyllis was a widow with a driver and lived just up the road, a spry 55 or 50. She had destroyed all records of her birth when she turned 36 or 31. Nobody knew for sure. While Ruth waited for Nathan, she called the factory to ask Carl if he could pick up eggs and spaghetti on his way home. Carl's secretary, Hannah Zielinski, answered the phone and made noises of delay and then confusion, and then finally told Ruth that Carl had never made it into the office that day. Hannah had assumed he was taking a day off. She'd been surprised, she told Ruth, since there was a purchase order that needed fulfilling for the Albertsons account, and Carl had expressed concern the day before that the drafting department was lagging on the order. This would put the factory behind schedule by days or weeks. Hannah hadn't called him at home because, she told Ruth, there was no need to. The drafting department had delivered, and everything was running smoothly for Albertson. Secretly, Hannah was worried that Carl had told her he was taking the day off and she hadn't remembered, which would make Carl angry. Hannah had recently become engaged to a man from the factory's engineering department and had already been berated by Carl for her distraction several times in the prior 2 weeks. Carl, Hannah knew, took pride in a distinct form of management, running a tight ship, which mostly meant walking around with the baseline assumption that everyone was stealing from him constantly, sometimes in the form of money, but especially in the form of time. This was a lesson passed to him by his own father, who had founded and run the factory all the way up to his death. And this was why Carl rarely took time off, much less spontaneous time. And also why Hannah later told the police that she felt she would have remembered it if Carl had told her he was taking the day. Ruth hung up the phone, her finger to her mouth. She stood for a long minute, the phone going dead, then silent, then the dial tone, then the obscene, too-loud clamor of a 1980s kitchen phone off the hook. Her mother-in-law walked in and looked from Ruth to the phone and then back to Ruth. "What is wrong with you?" Phyllis asked. Within 20 minutes, the local police arrived. Within an hour, Ruth's mother, Lipsha, entered. Within 24 hours, the FBI was setting up camp at Carl and Ruth's home. 5 full-time agents, 2 of whom were named John, one of them a woman, Leslie, around the clock, sleeping in the guest rooms and the kids' rooms and the living room. There were 3 members of the Middle Rock Police Department assigned to the house, but they were mostly useless. Owing to its wealth and relative distance from anything that resembled a working-class neighborhood, Middle Rock was a preternaturally safe place in the 1980s, and the police there had no experience dealing with something as strange and theoretically violent as a suddenly missing person. Ruth showed the agents recent pictures of Carl from their nephew's bar mitzvah and gave a description. 6'3", meaty but not fat, a prolific head of beautiful brown hair that defied logic. At 33, a mere 1 on the Hamilton-Norwood baldness scale, same as when she met him. Brown eyes that always looked like they were in a squint, but were nonetheless kind. And a nose whose apex pointed downward, so that he almost always looked like he was slightly repulsed by the thing he was looking at. Ruth's eyes stopped on a picture of the 2 of them dancing, her looking over her shoulder, perhaps her name being called by someone or just a photographer who took the picture. "This is us dancing," she said. The agents nodded thoughtfully and wrote in their notepads. And they asked questions. Was anyone angry at him? Did anyone have reason to threaten him? Did he ever talk about enemies? Or even something...